All right, so it's a great good evening to you, our dear viewers, and welcome to Meet Your Leaders. Remember that Meet Your Leaders is a program that comes your way every Wednesday at about this time, going all the way up to 21, as we always get to bring to you different topics of discussions as well as different people that come through to get to talk about different issues that are affecting you, our people out there. Of course, I am your host, Lance Sanibanda, and of course, this evening we are getting to look at the CPI report on corruption. And my guest this evening is none other than Brighton Tembo, who is the Executive Director as well as CEO of Community Action Against Corruption. This is not his first time coming through on the program, but rather his second as we get to tackle and deal with corruption issues. Mr. Tembo, good evening and welcome to the program.
Good evening, Lancy. Thank you so much for hosting me today.
All right. And of course, our dear viewers, remember that you can be part of the program by simply leaving out a comment underneath this broadcast as we are coming to you live direct on our Facebook page as well as on our YouTube channel, which is Ubuntu Channel Zambia. So YouTube, Facebook, as well as Twitter, we are live. Leave a comment, ask your question, as well as share with us your views on what we are discussing this particular evening. Now, quickly, allow me to go through, obviously, the introduction of what we are looking at, talking about the CPI index. So CPI index is simply Corruption Perception Index, which is mostly released by the Transparency International Zambia under the theme corruption and injustice. Now, this is the theme for 2023. Now, this reveals that most countries that have made little or no progress in tackling public sector corruption in more than a decade. So the global trend of weakening justice systems is reducing accountability for public officials, which allows corruption to thrive. And of course, this year's CPI shows mixed results. Obviously, this CPI is it shows significant improvements in a few African countries, although most African countries have showed stagnation, thereby maintaining the region's consistently poor performance at regional average of 33 to 100. And of course, for the very first time in a decade, Zambia has improved in its CPI score because this year or 2023 CPI shows that Zambia has improved from 33 out of 100 in 2022 to 37 out of 100 in 2023, which is consequently improving the rank by 18 places from 116 of 180. Of course, this is how we are faring right in Zambia. So we moved from 116 to 98 out of 180 in 2023. To help me discuss this report, as well as also issues that circumference or come through in the issue of the fight against corruption, as I mentioned, is the CEO for Community Action Against Corruption. This is Mr. Tembo. Mr. Tembo, in a nutshell, let's get to look at the so-called improvements that Transparency International Zambia has noted in the fight against corruption for Zambia from 2022 to 2023.
Okay, Lancy, you are getting me?
Yes, I can get you clearly.
Okay, you know, Lancy, when we are looking at the Corruption Perception Index for the year 2023, which was announced by Transparency International recently, we have first to compare it with what they announced for the year 2022, because these are consecutive years, 2022 and 2023. If you look at the Corruption Perception Index for the year 2022, it was announced that Zambia did not make any progress in terms of ranking. Zambia was static in 2022. Then the 2023 index has shown great improvement according to Transparency International. Now, when we look at that, Lance, we have to ask Transparency International to be sincere with their report, because we have to ask Transparency International to state which factors were absent in 2022 when Zambia did not make any progress, which were present in 2023 when Zambia made this progress we are talking about, where Zambia has moved from position number 33 to position number 37. The Transparency International should state these factors. If you look at that report, they have not clearly stated the factors that were absent in 2022 when Zambia was stagnant, and they did not. They have not stated the factors that have made Zambia to make this progress from 33 to 37. So without these factors, we as Community Action Against Corruption, we are very much doubtful if this progress is a real progress, because real progress must be supported by factors on the ground to substantiate the report. So as long as the factors are not highlighted, then we are still questioning, and Transparency International should tell the people of Zambia which factors have made this progress. Because if you look at what was going on in the year 2023, the government of the Republic of Zambia did not introduce any new measures in the corruption fight that can make Zambia to deposit progress in terms of corruption. Without measures, we have to ask now, which factors have necessitated this kind of progress on the Corruption Perception Index? Because when we look at Lance, when we look at 2022, when Transparency International said Zambia did not make any progress in terms of ranking, we were very much surprised, because in 2021, Zambia had just changed the government. And when there is change of government, Lance, we should expect two situations to happen. If there is a democratic way of changing government, definitely there is reduction in corrupt activities, because people there, they are not sure. Those people in government institutions, they play a game of let's wait and see how this government is going to be. Now, immediately the UPND government came into power. What they did was they sealed all the loopholes which were there, which were avenues for corruption in the PF government. For example, they stopped awarding contracts to infrastructure development. They also tightened the screws on public procurement and general expenditure. So in government institution in 2022, we expected Transparency International to indicate Zambia making progress at that point. So when we look at what happened in 2022, the report which showed that Zambia was static, we could not believe that Zambia was static, because there were factors that could have made Zambia to make progress in that ranking, but there was zero progress made. Then in 2023, without the government implementing any measures concerning corruption fight, we saw Zambia making progress. So here we are looking at Transparency International not being very sincere with their ranking, and they have to justify the factors that have made 2023 to be a progressive year in terms of corruption fight. Because if those factors are not there, then we challenge Transparency International to tell us which report was not real, which report was fake, 2022 or 2023, because one must be fake.
Now, Mr. Tembo, maybe from the executive summary, I think you would notice Executive Director for Transparency International Zambia, Mr. Morris Nyambe, mentioning the 4-point improvement in the CPI score for Zambia, of which he mentioned the establishment of the Economic and Financial Crimes Court, the proliferation of integrity mechanisms such as integrity committees, gift policies, and service charters. Obviously, also the reduction in the risk of bribery. within the business environment, and also the reduction in political corruption due to the elevation of the fight against corruption under this administration. So, Transparency International Zambia had put up a 4-point improvement situation, which has made Zambia to have this particular score that they have given to it.
That if you look at that, the establishment of the Financial and Crimes Court has no effect because they are looking at corruption in government institutions. Now, if you look at the Financial and the Crimes Court, it is taking on the cases that were from previous regime, or the cases of corruption from the previous regime. That is what they are attending to. Are you getting me? Then, when was the Financial and Crimes Court established? Was it not there in 2022 when Zambia failed to make any progress? All those factors they are mentioning, Lancy, were there in 2022 when Zambia failed to make any progress. So we are now doubting what transpired for those factors to cause an effect this time around. So if we say measures put in place, which measures are new, which were not there in 2022? That is the question we're asking them. They have to tell us which measures were among those measures that you've mentioned, Lance. They were there in 2022, and Zambia did not make any progress. So what has happened to those measures for those measures now to register progress in the latest CPI? There is no validity in that statement.
All right. Now, maybe moving further or getting to break down this same CPI report done by Transparency International Zambia. Obviously, it gets to give a comparative performance of 2022 to 2023. So, according to the performance of Zambia in 2022, corruption fight was standing on 33%, and currently it's standing on 37%. Obviously, this is due to the fact that all the four comparative issues that I've mentioned, which they listed out, because they have happened or they were happening. And you are saying these were there in 2022, but we were still stagnant in terms of fighting corruption. What makes your perception right that nothing has really changed and the movement in terms of percentage from 33 to 37 is questionable by Transparency International Zambia?
Yes, Lance. Hello, are you getting me?
Yes, I can get you.
Okay, Lance, look at this. The Transparency International, when they said Zambia was static in 2022, are you getting me? Zambia was static, meaning in 2021, are you getting me? In 2021, we were under the PF government. 2022, under the UPND government. So, Lance, we all remember what was going on in the PF government in terms of corruption. There was open corruption in the PF regime. So there is no way when the UPND took over power, we can experience the same levels of corruption in the government institution. Are you getting that point?
Yes.
So you cannot compare the amount of corruption which was taking place in 2021 under the PF government and corruption which was taking place in 2022 under the UPND government. What we expected, Transparency International, like I have highlighted the factors. In 2022, Zambia was supposed to deposit a positive result, not static. Are you getting that point? Because we are looking at two different governments. We are looking at two different governments. You can definitely, by all means, whatever research was done in 2021 under the PF government and 2022, we cannot have the same score. That is not a reality. So then in 2023, when they are saying we've made progress, there is a contradiction here. There is a contradiction here because the factors that they are pointing at to say these are the reasons why we've deposited the progress, they were there in 2022. They were there in 2022. At least in 2022, if transparency is realistic, they were supposed to say Zambia deposited a positive result. And if they said in 2022 to say Zambia deposited a positive result, and this year Zambia again has deposited a positive result, it was going to be consistent with reality. But there is this contradiction between the two statements, and that is what we are questioning. That's why we are saying, which of the two reports was fake or is fake? Is it 2023 or 2022? We are questioning that because we are looking at these factors that I'm telling you, that I'm explaining to you, Lance. We cannot compare. Zambia cannot, there is no way the ranking of Zambia in terms of corruption can be same under PF government and under UPND government. That's not a reality, and Transparency International is supposed to explain that fact clearly.
Now, is still going further with this report. It says that 20 years after the adoption of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, progress in the fight against corruption remains limited, and over 2/3 of the countries covered by this CPI report still score below 50 out of 100%, whilst 28 countries have made significant progress over the past decade, and another 34 have regressed. Now, when you look at this report, the 118 that have stayed the same, Zambia is among the 118 that have stayed the same in a decade. But then the report still continues to say that Zambia has somehow increased within this same decade in terms of ranking. Corruption has reduced a little bit, and our percentage has gone a little bit up in terms of being active fighting corruption. But still in the same vein, we are among the 118 countries that have stayed the same. What do you make of this information?
You know, transparency is full of contradictions. Transparency International is full of contradictions. Look at this. Last year, when they released their report, they indicated that there was an increase in bribery taking. But today, they are saying there was a reduction in bribery taking. So Transparency International should be very much realistic in conducting their research, because their research, if you look at, we as Community Action Against Corruption, we even doubt if these people, for sure, they do conduct a research, because a research should have something that should prove beyond any reasonable doubt to people to say this research was carried out and it has validity, not a research which looks like a guesswork. Not a research which looks like a guesswork. That's why when they released the 2023, 2022 report, there was a backlash. People in government and other institutions, even the Zambia police, rejected, for the first time, the Zambia police rejected the bribes payers index, which showed that, which put Zambia police at the top. Zambia police rejected that on the basis of questioning. Which people do they question for them to come up with such kind of reports? Even CPI, if you look at CPI, they should not just come and say Zambia has made improvement. They have to put out factors clearly for people to see that the factors that have generated the results are these, that are based on research. Now, when we look at CPI, there is no indication of evidence of research on corruption, though Transparency wants to hide into the fact that they collect their information from reputable institutions. Reputable institutions, even reputable institutions, must be questioned. How do they gather that information? Which institutions? Because here in Zambia, if I can challenge Transparency International on the mode which they use to gather information. That's why we, as Community Action Against Corruption, we respect the Financial Intelligence Center report very much than the Corruption Perception Index, which appears almost like a guesswork. That's why in 2022, when Transparency said Zambia did not make any progress, when they faced a backlash, I think when they got what people said about that report, then in 2023, they want to make amends. It's like this report, from the look of things, since it is lacking evidence of factors that have made Zambia record this progress. That's why, as Community Action Against Corruption, we described this report as an apology to government from Transparency International for releasing a misleading report for the year 2022. So they wanted to make amends. If this report, hello?
Yes. Speaking about 2022, when we talk about the Zambia Bribe Payers Index survey, obviously, which indicated an improvement in the bribery situation in Zambia's public sector, that is as of 2022, and you've highlighted, those backlashes which were there, where the Zambia police had to dispute where they were put and stuff like that. You are an organization that track or fight corruption in the community, as well as put government into check in terms of corruption fight. You are against this report and the report of 2022 in terms of the Zambia Bribe Payers Index. Where will the citizen then get the right information in terms of the fight against corruption and how we are performing as a country in this vein?
That is a challenge to the Anti-Corruption Commission and other stakeholders so that they can, in terms of relying upon, that's why I've suggested Zambia as a country should put much attention to the Financial Intelligence Center report and the Auditor General's report. These two reports can help Zambia understand the level at which we are moving. Look at Transparency International saying Zambia has made progress. This progress they are talking about, it's a total contradiction. The information that we got from the Auditor General's report, where a lot of government departments were made to answer to certain questions that definitely were motivated by corruption, misuse of public funds. You saw the people, how government heads of department were sweating at parliament. It's because of the same misuse of public funds motivated by corrupt behavior. That is just one example indicating that the Transparency International CPI report is a questionable research that should not be trusted. Let us trust the Financial Intelligence Center report. We can start our work from there. Let us trust the Auditor General's report. I think these two reports can help us know where we are going, where we are, and where we are coming from. Unlike the Transparency Corruption Perception Index, which is just a blank statement, which lacks reality, which lacks validity.
Now, in the fight against corruption, they've always been calls to government to say they should accelerate the need to implement, the access to information bill or act in order to make justice more transparent, in the out-of-court settlements and enforcements, as well as to make legal procedures and administrative rules more open to public scrutiny. Now that the access to information bill was enacted into law, do you think that the acceleration, do you think that we are going to see more of information being garnered or being offered to the public in terms of the fight against corruption and, of course, in the out-of-court settlements and enforcements?
Okay, Lancy, to start with, before I answer your question, let me state that Before, when Transparency International announced that they are going to release the 2023 report, within days of announcing that, they had put up an advert to ask people to participate in ascertaining whether the levels of corruption and alike in Zambia. So you can look at that move, because the report was already known to Transparency International, where Zambia was ranking. Are you getting that point? Then, even before they announced, they conducted a social media, I'll call it was a social media survey. I think the idea behind that social media survey was to cover up, which they will use to come and show to the people of Zambia, because they knew that intelligent people will question again the validity of that report. So they wanted to conduct a sham without any validity, social media survey, which can support the result which they already knew. If they were yes, why didn't they that survey way back conducted the results already for a particular national announcement? So you can see that the survey, the social media survey which Transparency conducted, was in preparation of a cover-up in case Zambians, like Community Action, through Community Action Against Corruption, rejects the report. That is what they did. Then, out of court settlement of corruption cases, Lancy, we don't, we as Community Action Against Corruption, we do not condone that. We do not support that. That is an encouragement to the would-be corrupt people and the corrupt people who are already corrupt to continue siphoning public resources from government, because out of court settlement is not any punishment in any way in terms of corruption fight. For example, Lance, why are we against that? Lance, here is a person, he has stolen something, he has stolen money from government and managed to buy a house, then you come and grab that house from that person. Which pain, which punishment have you inflicted on that person? The pain can only be there if a person labored to build that house, not a criminal who had stolen money, then buy or build houses, then you get, it's like a criminal, you've recovered something stolen from a criminal. Do you think you've punished a criminal, Lance? That is not punishment. So the Anti-Corruption Commission, will come to that later, is a missing link in the fight against corruption in Zambia, and it is a disappointment.
Very interesting argument that you put up there, and maybe before I even continue on obviously recommendations that or before I go to recommendations that Transparency International Zambia has put across in terms of the combating the fight against corruption, let's go to this same out of court settlement which Community Against Corruption is not for. Don't you think this is a corruption fight is a fight where you want to regain what this criminal or this person had stolen from the public funds? You want to regain it, you want to repossess it, and obviously put it back in the national treasury or in the public for public performance, and like more of punishing the person. So out of court settlement is more like this person accepts that yes, what they did is bad, they are remorseful about it, so instead of punishing them or instead of taking them to jail, they are ready to pay back or to give back whatever that they had stolen. Isn't this a good idea or a good deal?
It's a very bad idea, Lancy. Why don't they negotiate with a person who has, maybe a person who had stolen a goat? How many people are languishing in prison because they had snatched a cell phone? How many people are languishing in our prisons because they had stolen a goat? I think out of settlement should be done to petty thieves, not senior criminals. To senior criminals, out of court settlement is encouraging corruption, because what you should know is, under PF, we had the officials who had plundered and looted this country. And the UPND is there. What you should know, Lance, the UPND government is not a government of angels. It is a government of human beings. And human action is always followed by precedence. So the people who are serving in UPND, when they see their colleagues negotiating for out of settlement, what is it that is going to prevent them from also engaging in the same, with the hope of coming and negotiate when the time to reckon comes? Because, for example, if these people should return whatever they had stolen without punishment, there is no law in Zambia which prevents government from repossessing properties of people who are stolen from the Zambians, by, if a person is convicted in the courts of law, government can convict somebody as well as repossessing the properties of that particular individual. So out of court settlement is a soft way of fighting corruption, and it will not help Zambia, and it will not deter the would-be corrupt people in future. So Zambia should not go that way. Let us go the way of prosecuting these people in the courts of law, and if they are found guilty, let them go to prison and repossess their properties. Unlike a situation where you negotiate with criminals to say, can you bring back what you had stolen from the Zambians? Then we let you scot-free. We are not doing ourselves a good service. And that is a wrong way of fighting corruption, because in future, Lancy, these people, they are very intelligent people. In future, don't be surprised when you see these people coming back to claim those properties, to say they were wrongly seized. Because in Zambia, a person can only be guilty if he's found guilty by the competent court of law. Unlike a situation where the Anti-Corruption Commission just decide to say, we are seizing or forfeiting these properties to the state. I'm telling you the truth. Zambia, we had that example. When President Mwanawasa was fighting corruption and there was change of government. Do you know that some of the properties that were seized by the task force on corruption were handed back to the people they were seized from when there was change of government? So why should the Anti-Corruption Commission continue with something that failed in the past, not a long time ago, but the recent past? So depending on that seizure of properties and forfeiture without making people undergo prosecution in the courts of law is a temporal measure in fighting corruption.
All right. To you, our dear viewer, remember that you are watching Meet Your Leaders on Ubuntu channel. This is a program that comes your way every Wednesday from 20 to 21, where we get to discuss different issues and factors that get to affect you in the community as well as in your life. I am your host, Lance Banda, and this evening I'm playing host to Mr. Brighton Tembo, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Community Action Against Corruption. And we are discussing the CPI report on corruption by TIZ, as well as the continued corruption fight in the country, or simply put, the New Dawn corruption fight in the nation. So we have shared with you the studio link. You this time around, you are open to come through into the studio, join us, and share with us your sentiments, ask your question, as well as also you can be able to be part of the program by simply leaving a comment underneath this broadcast. Remember, we are live on YouTube, on Facebook, as well as on our Twitter channel right here. This is Ubuntu channel Zambia. Mr. Tembo, quickly, let me dash to obviously recommendations that TIZ had recommended to the government through that report, which the 2023 CPI report, to see on how best this government can fight corruption. So it talks about government taking action to limit excessive patronage, nepotism, job reservations, exchange of favors, as well as secret party funding and suspiciously close enacting a law to regulate political party and campaign financing and also promoting merit-based appointments. Just this recommendation, it brings out a lot, Mr. Tembo. Time and again, we've heard the citizens of this nation talk about there should be a law to find out or to investigate who funds a political party when we are in an election year. Where do political parties get their funding? How do they spend that money? And obviously, appointments as well as jobs are now linked to political parties in power, unlike people that are specialized and qualified for these jobs. Do you think that if this affected, we can have or we can attain a positive in terms of fighting corruption in this nation? Can corruption cases go down?
Definitely, yes. If you check our statements, Lancy, we've always been singing about a political party funding because, all these governments that we put in power, they come into power not to come and start conducting corruption. But what pushes them into corruption is the way they sustained themselves when they were in opposition. There were those people who were funding them. Are you getting that? So those people who fund political parties when they are in opposition are the people who influence governments to start engaging in corruption. For example, here is an hefty funder of a political party when it is in opposition. And once that political party forms government, that funder wants a contract. Definitely there, you cannot bite the finger that feeds you. So that's key. And as Community Action Against Corruption, that has been our song, and we've been singing to say political parties should review the funding, because the people who fund political parties are the ones who initiate corruption in governments, and they hold our governments at ransom. So that one is a very good recommendation, and we've also recommended as a measure to curb corruption in government.
All right. Moving on to another recommendation that was made, government should accelerate corruption prevention efforts such as whistleblower protection and declaration of assets. Just ending from here without reading the whole lot of it. These two issues have been have been turned into songs, Mr. Tembo. The current DG for ACC spoke of asset declaration by these public servants. Public servants, not only these politicians that are in political offices, but even these civil servants that are in these influential offices where they make decisions. There's need for them to declare their assets as they are getting into those offices. And obviously, year out, they should declare their assets so that we know their net worth and know if diligently their net worth is according to what they are getting or there's some malpractice somewhere. This has been a song. Citizens have been crying about it. People like you and your organization, Community Against Corruption, have been singing about it. Also, the issue of whistleblower protection. Time and again, we've seen people whistleblowing and they are left to the public. They are left for whoever that they have whistleblowed on without protection to get back to them and obviously intimidate them, therefore hiding or refusing to be, a witness in a case once it goes to court. How do you look at this recommendation?
Let me first talk about asset declaration. I think the Anti-Corruption Commission, for coming up with that asset declaration for civil servants, they have the issue at wrong timing. Why am I saying raising the issue at wrong timing? because the bone of contention in Zambia, which has been a song all around, is for the Republican president to declare his assets, of which government has refused to say. There is no law in Zambia which compels the president to declare his assets. So we are very much surprised that the Anti-Corruption Commission, this is when they are coming up with the idea to say they are formulating a law which will compel civil servants to declare their assets. The idea is good, but it should be limited at the level of permanent secretary, not the level of ordinary civil servant. It should be limited to the level of directors, the people who have access to finances, not ordinary civil servants without access. That should be done at a certain level, unlike just calling for declaration when the people on the top are not willing to do the same. So on that one, it's a contentious issue which the Anti-Corruption Commission could have started by formulating the law which will compel all the top leadership in government, including the president, to declare their assets before coming down to the people on the ground. Then the issue of protection of whistleblowers. At the moment, the work of the Anti-Corruption Commission is not inspiring enough to make people become whistleblowers. For example, imagine, Lance, if you were one of the whistleblowers in the case concerning ministers who served in the PF regime, those who were arrested as early as 2021, and they are still free today. Those people have influence, they've got money. Are you getting that point? Now,
yes,
you are
yes.
just an ordinary whistleblower. Are you protected in that way? So even the time it takes in Zambia to conclude corruption cases is something that is very much dangerous to whistleblowers. Imagine, Lance, you volunteer to be a whistleblower in a case involving a very powerful person, and you are expecting that person to go in the courts of law, prosecuted and taken to prison. But the Anti-Corruption Commission decides to just seize or forfeit the properties of that person. Don't you think the vengeance will come on you? So there's no law in Zambia in place that can protect whistleblowers. And the interest which the Anti-Corruption Commission has shown so far in the fight against corruption, apart from their rhetoric and empty pronouncements, there is nothing that can encourage people to become whistleblowers.
Now, in an issue that you raised earlier, in terms of public servants, public servants declaring their assets and saying it should be limited to directors, permanent secretaries, as well as people that hold positions that obviously has access to funds and making decisions. There's a popular saying, or there are popular sayings which talk about this same issue where somebody says decisions are not made in offices. These decisions of who to appoint, who to fight corruption, and who to look at when things go bad. Decisions are not made in offices. Decisions are made on a golf course. Decisions are made when they're having tea and bread somewhere and all this and that. In the office, it's only legitimized, but decisions are made somewhere else. What does this entail? What does this entail in the fight against corruption if decisions are made elsewhere and then in the office it's just legitimized?
Lancy, if that one, it doesn't matter. People can meet at a restaurant, people can meet wherever they want to meet, as long as implementation is done in the offices. That is wrong. So it is the office orders, those people holding those offices, who help to implement what they decided outside and start getting illegal resources from government that commit those kind of corruption, who are wrong in that case. That's why when you look at the reason why I said declaration of assets should start with the people who control the finances in each and every ministry. Because if you look at junior officers, these junior officers are just recruited by senior officers in the corruption web. Because I doubt if an ordinary civil servant at the lowest can influence corruption at the top. It is people in those offices who are controlling officers, like permanent secretaries, directors, managers, who engage the junior officers into corruption. So if we can deal with corruption of managers, controlling officers, then we can solve corruption at the bottom. Unlike formulating a law which is targeting a person who has no access to the finances, a person who has no access to influence or influencing any decision in the ministry, we are wasting time. We should focus on people who influence decisions, people who control the finances. That's why I've said, let us end at directors, let us look at permanent secretaries, let us look at these people who are in charge of resources. The government knows at which level decisions are made. Not going, for example, you look at NS. NS is a civil servant. Then you want the NS to declare assets. If NS can be found with a lot of unaccountable assets, just know that that NS was working in tandem with management who control the finances.
All right. Remember, this is Meet Your Leaders on Ubuntu channel, and this evening I'm playing host to the Chief Executive Officer of Community Against Corruption, Mr. Brighton Tembo, as we are discussing the report by TIZ and simply talking about the corruption fight in Zambia. Of course, we are now taking in your comments as well as your questions and your views. You can send them through. We'll be glad to get to read them out. Director, if maybe we can get to read one or two so that at least we can have our viewer engaged as well as also get to see what questions are there and have our guest respond to them. Okay. All right. So, well, the privilege of being the host. So this question still gets to you coming from obviously Ubuntu as staff. Mr. Tembo, what do you say about the argument that out-of-court settlement helps to quickly make recoveries, unlike the long court process where time and resources are wasted and usually doesn't even give good results? All right, let's bank on that one. Hopefully you've taken note, Mr. Tembo. Let's get to look at the other one coming through and get to respond to that which has come through. Chiponta Julie says, Mr. Tembo, they say out-of-court settlements allow for quick recovery, unlike the long court process, where time and resources seem to be wasted. What is your view of this argument? All right, if we can read the last one, and then we have Mr. Tembo responding to what has come through. So Chiponta continues to say, what does government need to ensure that corruption cases are concluded quickly, unlike what we are seeing, where cases go up to 10 years? All right, very interesting question right there. Mr. Tembo, the first two, obviously, they are similar, and also this one, if we can get to respond to them.
Okay, Lancy, you know what? In Zambia, we usually accept things that have no substance. Look at this. When we say it is expensive to make people go through the process of prosecution in the courts of law, and it takes time. Let me first start by stating the fact that it is not expensive to prosecute people in the courts of law. Why am I saying so? Number one, the prosecutors who handle those cases in the courts of law are paid by government every month, whether they are prosecuting in the courts of law or they are not prosecuting. There is a salary that comes. The judges, they are paid salaries every month, whether they are attending to court cases or they are not attending to court cases. The Anti-Corruption Commission is paid by government every month, whether they are arresting people or they are not arresting. So if the case takes 2 years or it takes 3 years in the courts of law, government does not lose. Whatever amount of money government is supposed to lose does not exceed anything. Because even when a prosecutor is in the courts of law or is not, is going to be paid. We can say
Mr. Tembo,
prosecuting corruption cases is expensive. Hello?
Okay, so sorry if I can, if I can come in on there. Maybe what Chiponta is trying to put across is the fact that you take this matter to court. It takes a month or two prosecuting this matter, and then you find that the DPP enters a nolle, or if not a nolle, you find that this person is not found guilty of the issue. So it would have been better settling it out of the court, because this person would have accepted to committing that wrong, which maybe at the time government does not have enough evidence to prove in court. You would rather get that out of court settlement than going into court. You lose on time, you lose on resources, and then you enter a nolle. Maybe he's taking it in that direction.
No, Lancy, look at this. For a person to confess to say these were stolen properties, then automatically, even in the courts of law, it is very much easy to prosecute that person. Remember, the president, when he was saying, when he was talking about the law which will now make corruption cases to be concluded in 5 months, he said the people, meaning the corrupt people, will not have that freedom of influencing or delaying. He used the word delaying corruption cases. Are you getting that point? So
yes.
When we look at the out of court settlement, so what you should understand is the fact that it is very much easy to prosecute these people in the courts of law, because if you say, let us just get the assets and forget, then we are perpetuating corruption. That's why we've got the courts of law. Why don't they negotiate with people? Maybe somebody who has stolen a court, those petty criminals. Why not negotiating with them? It is easy, but it's a picture which we've created ourselves, in which we think it is too difficult to prosecute the people who have stolen in huge sums of money. I'm telling you the truth. If the president can now start saying we can put corruption cases in 5 months, don't you think it is just a lack of interest or lack of commitment which delay corruption court cases in the courts of law? Because if the president has said 5 months, I'm telling you the truth, if that law becomes, if that proposal becomes law, you will see corruption cases being concluded in 5 months. Then you realize that the 3 years, 4 years that we take, it is because of a conspiracy between corrupt people and people in the judiciary and the people in the system of government that help those people to delay corruption cases. So if it is impossible, why did the president mention 5 months?
Well, pretty interesting questions being raised there, Mr. Tembo, and they leave much to be desired. To you, our dear viewer, remember that we are still taking your questions, your concerns, as well as your contribution on the program right here. We are waiting for you to send those through by leaving a comment, or better still, by sending us a message, and we'll be glad to read your comment, your message, or your contribution, so that you are also part of the program. This evening, I'm hosting Mr. Brighton Tembo, who is Chief Executive Officer for Community Action Against Corruption. And of course, we are discussing the CPI report done by Transparency International Zambia. Now, Mr. Tembo, let me move away from the report and recommendations. Let's quickly come to what we've already started talking about, the fight against corruption. Last time when we hosted you here, you were not confident of this current regime to fight corruption or to effectively fight corruption, because apparently it appears that they are fighting past corruption and not current corruption. Well, we've seen a minister that, well, as to media reports, resigned after there were issues or perceptions that he is corrupt, or there was a corruption allegation against him. Foreign Affairs Minister Kakubo resigned on those grounds, and after resigning, following day, the ACC pounced on him. Investigations are ongoing. Before he even resigned, a few months into his job, we saw allegations on social media of him visiting a Chinese company and coming out with a briefcase and stuff like that. That was justified. Years after, a year or two after that, we see something again coming up against him, and he tenders in a resignation so that he can pave way for anti-corruption commission to pounce on him and obviously investigate. Are you still of the idea that this government, this regime, is still hell-bound on fighting past corruption and not current corruption?
Lancy, there are factors that we have to understand why not only this government, all the successful governments, they have been attempting to fight past corruption, not current corruption. The reason for that, Lancy, is very simple. The reason is the system that we use to appoint people in institutions that are supposed to fight corruption. For example, it is the president who appoints the director of the Anti-Corruption Commission. It is the president who appoints the DPP. It is the president who appoints the Inspector General of Police. It is the president who appoints the director of the Drug Enforcement Commission. And it is the president who appoints even all the people who are supposed to help in the fight against corruption. Now, the same president appoints ministers. The same president appoints permanent secretaries. The same president appoints directors and commissioners in these other institutions. So it is very difficult at that point for Anti-Corruption Commission, for any other appointee appointed by the president to fight corruption or to arrest a minister who is still carrying the power that the president had vested in him. This is more the reason why when a minister is fired by the president today, tomorrow, if it is in the morning, in the evening, you see the Anti-Corruption Commission coming out in the open. We are investigating this person. But why were they not investigating that person when he was still holding on to the position of minister? It is because that person, to some extent, is an extension of the presidential power. Are you getting that point? This is more the reason why Zambia, as long as the system of appointing these people who are heading institutions that fight corruption, we continue to have that system where these people are appointed by the president. We will continue to fight corruption of the past. Look at the situation when we had the PF government in power. All these people arrested by the Anti-Corruption Commission were not arrested by the same institution at that time. The reason why these people are answerable today, it is because they have lost that presidential protection. So as long as the system remains like this, Zambia will continue fighting corruption of the past. So if Zambians want the people in the current regime to account for what they are doing, definitely we have to wait not until this government is out of power. That is the reason why we will perpetuate fighting corruption of the past. Look at the issue of the minister Kakubo. Yes, on that one, as Zambians, let me just explain it a bit. As Zambians, we have to understand one fact. That minister was not involved in direct corruption. So if the Anti-Corruption Commission is serious about the possible offenses which they could have given that minister, one, you cannot sell such a huge property over the table where you are exchanging cash, because doing that created a possibility of money laundering, because we don't know where those Chinese got that money from. We don't know if it is dirty money or it is genuine money. Then on the part of the minister, Minister Kakubo is educated enough to understand the fact that when you are selling a property, there is a certain tax that goes to government. ZRA must be involved. But when they transacted over the table, which tax did government get from the sale of that mine? That is tax evasion. So the Anti-Corruption Commission was supposed to investigate or arrest the minister over tax evasion, not what they are investigating. So when the Anti-Corruption Commission says we are investigating the former minister, that is just buying time. The minister will be cleared, and there are chances that he's going to bounce back into cabinet, because the cases, the possible cases that they were supposed to raise against the minister are already in the public domain. So we don't know what the Anti-Corruption Commission is investigating.
So are you confident, or do you still hold the perception that current corruption is not being fought, but rather past corruption is what is being fought? And subsequently, when we see a change of government, that's when we'll have current serving ministers or people in high portfolios being followed by the ACC because there's a change of government.
Yes, I agree with that statement, because look at this. Whistleblowers, or Zambians in general, they complained about the activities of Energy Minister Kapala, Peter Kapala. They complained about his activities. The Anti-Corruption Commission is mute. They have refused to carry out an investigation, because carrying out an investigation is not arresting a person. You are just trying to ascertain. They have done nothing on that one. Look at the allegations that are in supply of fertilizer, procurement of fertilizer. The Anti-Corruption Commission has failed to proceed to investigate what people are raising concerning that. Look at the issue of Tabo Kawana, where they said we are investigating over a certain amount of money. It has gone silent. Look at the Sujilite case. It is almost getting frozen. Look at the case which was unearthed at Ministry of Finance. Though that case happened during the PF, but some people who were found in that scam are very close. Some of the people in that scam at the Ministry of Finance are very close to government. That case is almost collecting dust. So you can see that there is this inertia for the Anti-Corruption Commission to deal with corruption of the current regime. So, like you've said, if there are people who are committing corruption in the current regime, the time to reckon will come after the change of government, because the current Anti-Corruption Commission cannot investigate these people because of the reason that I've given you.
Now, what seems to be the problem, Mr. Tembo? I think time and again, even just after the inauguration of President Hakainde Hichilema, he made mention that corruption will not be tolerated, and therefore law enforcement agencies will have to act or wake up to work on corruption issues, whether past, present. We can't talk about future because it's not here yet, but past and present corruption has to be fought. The president has given that directive. The president, in his speeches, has mostly given powers to law enforcement agencies to fight corruption, probe corruption at its earliest, whether it's a serving minister, a serving MP. He even goes further to mention ulipaweka bakakugwira na corruption. what seems to be the problem that even if whistleblowers take information to ACC, to DEC, still nothing gets to be done as long as this person is appointed by the president, this person is closer to the ruling party, this person is closer to the powers that be. What is the problem?
Lancy, there is a difference between a pronouncement and the action. So the president may have goodwill. That's why I always, as community action against corruption, we always say in the Africa, Zambia in particular, the fight against corruption does not necessarily depend on, it depends on the nature of the president that you have. It depends on the nature of the president that you have. If the president is not willing to have a person investigated, the Anti-Corruption Commission will remain mute. If the president has disowned a person who is corrupt, the Anti-Corruption Commission will arrest that person. So, a corruption fight does not necessarily depend on the laws in Zambia. It depends on the president. Because,
well,
Lancy, you know, the laws can be ignored. We saw how the law was ignored during the PF regime, and those ministers who were getting involved in corruption were left scot-free and continued to operate in their offices, not until they left power. That is when we've seen the Anti-Corruption Commission arresting them for their wrongdoings. Imagine if PF had continued. Do you think, Lancy, these people are supposed to be in the courts today? No, the answer is no. So you can see that the Anti-Corruption Commission, they just echo presidential statements. The president cannot even be willing to intimidate the Anti-Corruption Commission, but psychologically, just because the director is appointed by the president, there is that psychological intimidation in their minds, which make them not to act on people who are still in good books with the government or very much close to the ruling party. Remember, in case people have forgotten, in 2014-2013, the late President Michael Sata cautioned the Anti-Corruption Commission to say, you should not investigate my ministers without informing me. That is the statement which was made by the president then. Now, from that statement, which was made by the head of state at that time, we can draw a lot of conclusions on how the Anti-Corruption Commission operates.
Now, Mr. Tembo, allow me to bring this back a little bit, since the issues of corruption, fight of corruption, are very dear to the Zambian people's hearts. When the PF was in power, at some point, I remember then President Edgar Chagwalungu mentioning that his ministers are corrupt, were corrupt, and then also there was no action taken against them by the ACC then, and then when now President Hakainde Hichilema came into power, I think a year plus or not so, he had mentioned to say his ministers are beginning to learn the corruption that the PF was doing then. So meaning the president admitted to the fact that his ministers are corrupt. And the Anti-Corruption Commission being moved on his desk at State House meant that he has this information of corrupt ministers. And then he still continues to make statements or sentiments to say, let's fight corruption even now. I still don't understand why we still can't probe current corruption if the SEC is on the president's desk every day in the morning because it's at State House, and he himself, the president, made mention that his ministers are now learning the corrupt practices of the former ministers of PF.
Yeah, that statement was made, but we cannot take it to say the ministers, because if it was a serious pronouncement by the president, then we could have seen certain ministers being arrested by the Anti-Corruption Commission. Maybe the president spoke out of the cuff. It was just maybe additional information he was giving, but we don't think that was too official coming from the president. Because if there were ministers and the president meant his statement, we could have seen some ministers being arrested by the Anti-Corruption Commission. But looking at the fact that up to now, there are no ministers who have been arrested by the Anti-Corruption Commission, then we can take it to say the president was just speaking out of the cuff.
Well, anyway, time is not on our side. Maybe I can get your concluding remarks and obviously recommendations on how best we can curb corruption practices as well as enhance the corruption fight. This also brings me to the question that Chibonta had asked: what do we need to do in making sure that corruption cases that are actively in court are concluded within a certain period of time, and like taking 1 year, 2 years, all the way up to the next regime, and then all we see is a silent ear or a silent mouth being given to the Zambian citizens?
Okay, I think the lengthy period of time taken to conclude corruption cases, let us wait to see if the 5 months statement by the president is going to be implemented. Because we believe if that is implemented, then corruption cases will start getting concluded within the shortest possible time. Then, my concluding remarks, I have to say that as Community Action Against Corruption, we are very much disappointed with the Anti-Corruption Commission. They have not lived up to the expectation of the people. They have performed below average and below expectation, because when you look at the last report, which was given by the Anti-Corruption Commission, they said the last year, 2023, the entire year, they made 17, they managed to make 17 convictions and some other cases, acquittal and so forth. But our concern was the 17 convictions. You know, when you look at those 17 convictions, they were convictions of petty, corrupt people, people without names. Because out of the 17, Lancy, you cannot tell me who or which high-profile corruption case was concluded then. Nothing. So that is a disappointment, because what Zambians want, they don't want to hear that, no, a civil servant in Mwenelunga was arrested for corrupt practices involving 10,000 kwacha or 5,000 kwacha. So those cases are too obvious. We want to see what is it that is going to happen to the people who openly plundered and looted this country at will with that freedom of impunity. What is happening to them? Because we are still seeing them moving up the streets. Then we can advise the Anti-Corruption Commission to stop using shortcuts in fighting corruption. Like, for example, a full disclosure of assets. That measure cannot work to help fight corruption in Zambia. The pre-bargain kind of arrangement cannot work in Zambia. The forfeiture of assets without making people go to court cannot work in Zambia. It's a soft way of approaching the fight against corruption, and it is an indication that the Anti-Corruption Commission has no capacity to prosecute corruption cases in the courts of law. So they have to change their approach. They have to make people go through prosecution in the courts of law. There, then we'll see that they are serious. At the moment, there is nothing from the Anti-Corruption Commission to write home about. Then the office of the DPP is also a missing link in the fight against corruption, in the new Dawn government, because we have the Director of Public Prosecutions who seem not to understand exactly what is going on within his office. Remember, it took the Lusaka Magistrate, the judge in Lusaka Magistrate Court, to summon the DPP to come and explain the reasons why his prosecutors are failing to attend to corruption cases, the corruption case involving former Foreign Affairs Minister Joe Malanji and Fred Sonyama. He was called to come and explain. So now, if the DPP is fully in charge of his office, how can he fail to know that his prosecutors are not attending to court cases? That is a very big disappointment. Then you saw the DPP made a statement 2 months ago to say the reason why they are advocating for forfeiture of assets, it is because it is too difficult to prosecute corruption cases in the courts of law. He made that statement. But when the president said we can prosecute corruption cases in 5 months, there was the same director of public prosecution making a U-turn. Instead of, because we were expecting to say, when he said it is too difficult to prosecute corruption cases, he was standing on the facts. But when the president said we can finish cases in 5 months, there he was supporting the same. So what kind of contradiction is that? So it means the DPP is not the right person to be there. He's not doing the right job. Then the third institution that I blame for failure, lack of effective fight against corruption is the judiciary. The judiciary has not been effective. I'll give you an example, Hans, if time can allow me. You've convicted a person of corruption, sent to prison, and that person appeals the case. Today is February. Then that person appears today in February in court. Then you make an adjournment for that person to come and appear in June or July. What are you doing? Because the evidence are already in the courts of law. So the judiciary should wake up. And as community action against corruption, we are also very much worried with the number of judges that have been found wanting by the commission, this commission, which Judicial Complaints Commission.
Yes.
It is very much worrying. And we are now getting closer to the fact why corruption cases take long. Because the recent judge who was removed from his office, one of the cases he was given was delaying to depose cases in the courts of law. So you can see that even corruption cases are deliberately delayed in the courts of law. There is nothing. Zambians should not believe that corruption cases take too long. There is just a system deliberately organized to delay corruption cases.
Well, Mr. Tembo, thank you so much for coming through to the program and really appreciate your availability for the program.
Thank you so much, Lance.
All right, Brighton Tembo's Chief Executive Officer for Community Action Against Corruption was my guest today on Meet Your Leaders as we were discussing the report that was done by TIZ on corruption. And of course, I've been your host, Lance Sani Banda. And as we are saying bye-bye, remember that corruption continues to be endemic in Zambia. Therefore, as a country, we have remained in a position of underperforming in terms of fighting corruption. Let's all take part in the fight against corruption, and then, only then, will we see the development of Mother Zambia. Until we meet again next Wednesday on this exciting program, thank you. And on behalf of my entire production crew and producer, Emmanuel Nkunika, we say good night and have a pleasant evening.